Hi guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel, and today we've got something pretty exciting here. This is the XTool S1 40 watt. XTool recently reached out to me and asked if I wanted to receive one of these machines for free and in exchange make a few videos for you guys giving my honest feedback. And that's really important here. If you guys have followed the channel for a while, you know that I love giving things away for free. I've just open sourced my DIY CNC build, so you'll always get full transparency with me. They were kind enough to send me the riser base and the Rotary Kit Pro here, which I'm really excited about. And generally on this channel I take a show me approach as opposed to a tell me approach. And that's what I plan to do here. This isn't going to be a typical review, so I'm going to show you what this can do, and that way then you can decide whether it's for you or not. So let's waste no more time and dive straight in. The unboxing and setup of this machine couldn't have been any easier. The machine arrived in a fairly large box and it was packaged up very efficiently. I have to say I was very impressed with what XTool provided along with the machine. The included resources were very professional, including a well-written setup guide along with a booklet full of project inspiration. The XTool S1 requires very minimal setup on arrival, allowing you to get up and running in 15 minutes or less. I also received the riser base for use with the Rotary kit, which took an additional 10 minutes or so to install. The removable tray at the bottom of the machine must be installed on the riser, and then the machine itself had to be fixed down to the riser. You then have the flexibility of installing the honeycomb panel at two different heights, depending on what materials you're working with. The riser truly opens up this machine to a wide range of different materials and thicknesses, and I'd highly recommend it. There are a few other things to address before you can fire up the machine. There are some travel stops installed during shipping which you must remove. You can then proceed to install the 40 watt laser module, which is easy thanks to the locating pin on the back. You must then attach the magnetic probe to the side of the module and you're good to go. Looking at the back of the machine, we have the expected I/O, power, PC connectivity, air assist and an outlet for fume extraction. I installed the included extraction tubing and I highly recommend you do the same. The extraction tube isn't really long enough to reach out of a window, so I had to 3D print an adapter of my own to extend the tube myself. That being said, XTool do also sell a fume collector, which is technically the right way to do it, so I'll leave links to that in the description below. Upon successful power up of the machine, you should see it illuminate and home itself. Let's talk software. Most laser enthusiasts will be familiar with Lightburn, and while this machine does support Lightburn functionality, XTool have developed their own free software package called XTool Creative Space. Personally, I find this interesting and it's encouraging to see XTool going in this direction. So for this video, I will only be using XTool Creative Space, which is their own software package, so that I can give you my honest thoughts about it. One of the first things I want to introduce you to is something called twin point positioning, which is something I found to be a complete breath of fresh air when it comes to aligning your workpieces. So whenever you start a new project in XTool Creative Space, you're required to set the height of your workpiece so that the laser can autofocus for you. Let me say that again. It autofocuses for you. This is a big deal. We've all used those focus blocks in the past, and well, they kind of suck. In the software, you simply hit one button and the laser module will move into position and measure the height for you. From there, you can start marking out your processing area. The S1 has a positional tracking system, and as you move it around in the physical space, the software updates in real time and shows you exactly where the laser is. Using this, we can translate the area of our workpiece dimensions directly into the software. This is extremely valuable, particularly when you want to get something centered up perfectly, which you'll see later on. One of the first things I always do with any new machine or material is run a speed power test array. Fortunately, XTool Creative Studio has you covered. They've implemented this directly into the software so that you can have an array generated within just a few clicks. Given that I knew this was a very powerful machine and I had no prior experience with it, for the first test I limited the engraving power to 50% to see how it would perform on this 3.2mm plywood. I then performed a few other tests in search of a decent range of gradients. I also proceeded to do this for cutting in a single pass, again trying to narrow down a reasonable range of power and speed. This serves as a great reference board for future projects using this material. Here are the results, and as anticipated, this is a very powerful machine that can cut and engrave effectively at high speeds. Armed with knowledge of the machine's capabilities, I wanted to immediately challenge it with some intricate cutting tests. I imported this vector into Creative Studio and duplicated it with smaller and smaller versions of itself. This should give us an idea of where the machine would start to struggle. I wasn't expecting it to complete the last one, but to my surprise, the S1 managed to cut all of them. This is impressive, particularly for a 40-watt machine. Generally, higher power diode lasers tend to struggle when it comes to fine engraving or cutting due to their larger spot size. The S1, however, seems to be pretty close to an all-in-one solution. There are other modules available that you can swap out for a smaller spot beam, but I never felt like I needed to do that. The next thing I'd like to talk about is safety. A lot of enclosed lasers boast about safety, but I never really see many people testing these features out. The reason, I guess, is that nobody wants to start a fire inside their brand new laser. So I started a fire. I was playing around with some thicker materials, and I purposely slowed the laser down enough to ignite a fire. Immediately the S1 detected this, stopped the job, and alerted me in the Creative Space software. The software also reminds you every time you're about to run a job at high power and low speed, as this is generally a situation where a fire would occur. I like this because it reinforces safety. XTool also include their own safety training within Creative Studio, which is highly recommended. When a job is running, the machine will immediately stop whenever you attempt to open the lid of the enclosure. Not only does this protect your eyes, but also prevents you putting your hands anywhere near a powerful laser beam. Circling back to cutting, I performed a variety of tests on this 12mm MDF. I ran 100% power at 6mm per second, and it almost made it through in 2 passes. A third pass would have certainly done it. Bear in mind, 6mm per second is fairly quick for cutting on a diode laser. That's equivalent to 360mm per minute. It would have definitely made it through in 1 pass had I lowered the speed even further, but the purpose of this test was simply to see what it could do at these speeds. After doing a lot of high power cutting, it's often a good idea to freshen up the lens by giving it a clean. A Q-tip and rubbing alcohol should do the job. The laser module makes use of magnets, requiring no tools to perform this regular and essential maintenance. Next up, I wanted to try and engrave onto this serving tray. It was kind of an odd shape, but perfect to demonstrate the twin point positioning and why it's so powerful. When marking out your processing area, you can choose between 4 different types. For this piece, I chose to mark out a polygon. Just like before, we can move the head of the laser to multiple different points on the stock material and capture each of their positions. I was then able to import a vector that suited the material and line it up directly in the center of the area that I marked out. This is truly awesome and completely eliminates any guesswork that you typically have to do with a camera system. I ran this at 50% power, 386mm per second, and the result was great, and more importantly, perfectly aligned in the center. I then ran a couple more jobs on some other wooden products, the most notable one being this circle tray. Once again, I was able to take advantage of the twin point positioning system. I selected the circle, marked out 3 points, and I was able to translate the position of the board into Creative Studio. From there, I could line up my designs in the center and send it to the machine. This was one of my favorite pieces, and it just goes to show how quickly you can jump into XTool software and start making. The next thing I was really keen to test out was the curved surface mapping. Given that this laser can focus automatically, the Creative Space software allows you to map out curved surfaces. Following the instructions, I managed to map out the surface of this wooden spoon. I had to make a bit of a jig to stop the spoon from moving around, but it translated perfectly into the software. The rest of the process was business as usual. I just imported a simple vector and sent it off to the machine. As you can see here, the result was fantastic. every area engraved on the spoon is in focus as promised. There's just so much you can do with this machine. I tried out a variety of different materials and projects, and all of them turned out great. You could engrave dog tags such as this one, or even engrave custom cutlery for your furry friends. Maggie certainly approves. My partner loves corgis, and when she found out what I could do with this thing, she wanted as many corgi related items as possible. So I was able to engrave this 2025 calendar with a custom name and a corgi logo on the front. I was also able to engrave the same corgi SVG onto the handle of this purse. Again, this only took a few minutes, but it really adds personal touches to these simple items. I was even able to engrave onto a hat. This proved to be an interesting use of the curved surface mapping tool, which again performed flawlessly. I also got a shot here which really shows the laser moving in all three axes. It's worth noting here that due to the addition of Z-axis movement, the engraving speed is limited to 30mm per second for curved surfaces. Again, the result here was pretty good. Remember, all these items were just my first attempt, and if you dial in your settings, the results can be even better. XTool provided some sample materials with the machine, such as this A4 sized piece of leather, so I decided to put that to use and make a simple card wallet. This was quick and easy thanks to the material selector in Creative Studio, which contains a lot of the default settings for a range of different materials. This is worth mentioning because there's a community around this where you can share your own material settings. This can make working with other materials less intimidating and give you the confidence to try out other things. Another thing I tried was engraving onto this cardboard box. This demonstrated why the riser is beneficial for working with deeper materials. I was easily able to lower the honeycomb panel. This type of thing could be useful if you run your own business and you want to create custom packaging. You could even laser cut your own small cardboard boxes sheet metal style. Another sample material was a sheet of black acrylic. The laser made easy work of this, cutting in a single pass. The cut is very clean with good tolerance, as shown by reassembly of these small puzzle pieces. I also experimented with Slate, and just like I did with the plywood, I ran some power and speed tests to get a feel for what the machine was capable of. I also tested the dynamic range, and this machine is capable of a wide range of gradients. This dragon looked great on this serving tile, and it wasn't really a high resolution image. It's worth noting that Slate requires a lot of surface preparation, and often you can use a matte gloss to improve the dynamic range even further. I applied a matte gloss finish to this coaster image engraving, and you can really see the difference. As I explained earlier, I was also sent the Rotary kit, and this is the accessory I was most keen to explore. I'd never used one before and I wanted to gain some experience with it. The Rotary kit comes packaged up nicely and was very easy to assemble. It can be used in 4 different modes depending on what you need to engrave. I will demonstrate the chuck and the roller. The Rotary kit connects to the machine using this port on the right hand side. The first thing I wanted to engrave was one of these Tumbler flasks. When setting up the rotary tool inside of XTool Creative Studio, you'll be asked to provide the perimeter measurement of the object. While we're at it, let's grab a few other key measurements. We'll need to know the height of the engraving and the width of the front facing surface in this case. For the design, I kept it simple. Just my name and an SVG from one of the many assets included within Creative Space. It's worth noting that you have to orient the design correctly to ensure it engraves on the tumbler as expected. With the design ready to go, I placed the rotary kit inside the enclosure and measured the height. I then validated the work area by running the framing function. That is pretty much it. It was a lot more straightforward than I anticipated, and I began engraving my tumbler. The result was awesome, and it got me thinking about what else I could engrave on this thing. Next, I switched the chuck out for the rollers. I needed the rollers in order to engrave on this wooden rolling pin. The rotary kit having 4 different modes really has you covered for whatever you want to do. Once again, I measured the height, validated the working area, and with a new design ready to go, I began engraving. Again, the result here was fantastic. The last thing I wanted to try and engrave on was glass. Now, in order to engrave on glass, you have to coat the area you want to engrave. In this case, I used some black acrylic paint. you'll want to put it on fairly thick, and you can speed up the drying process with a heat gun or a hairdryer. The paint can then be washed off easily after engraving. I performed another power and speed test here on a glass jar, and this gave me a good idea of what settings to use. Having gained some experience with glass, I decided to engrave a floral pattern on a drinking glass. This adds a really nice touch, and you can create some truly unique gifts for people that they'd really appreciate. The results here speak for themselves. Another project I managed to create was this Randy Rhoads inspired polka dot flying V clock. I applied a finish to the front and back and then installed the clock mechanism behind. Really cool. So there we go guys, I hope you found that video particularly useful, especially if you're interested in buying this machine. If you are going to buy this machine, I do have links down below. I have a coupon code and an affiliate link. You'll be supporting the channel here at no extra cost to you, and I'd really appreciate it if you use those. I'll also put non-affiliate links if you don't want to support the channel, that's absolutely fine. But overall, I'm extremely pleased with this machine, and had I paid for it with my own money, it would have been worth it. And I've only had it a few weeks, you know, and I've just managed to explore as much as I could within that time so that I could give you my honest view on how it performs across the board. There are so many cool things about this machine that are innovative and really driving change in the laser industry. The first one being the distance measurement of your material, which as you saw then leads to the twin point positioning, which is just awesome. That blew me away. I've used so many lasers in the past that have that camera system above, and there's always frustration around the calibration and do you really trust it? Generally, you know, I don't like the camera based system anyway, so the twin point positioning system was just a breath of fresh air to me. Generally, I trusted it a lot more, and I think it's because it has that sort of feedback loop where, because you're physically moving the laser head around and marking out the points manually, you just have that trust in yourself that you did it correctly. The software captures those points accurately, and then when you produce a piece of work, when you see the results and how accurate it is, it really gives you confidence in this machine. The automatic distance measuring for curved surfaces, again, haven't seen that anywhere else. That's outstanding. I was able to engrave on that curved spoon and it was just absolutely spot on. You know, there was no issues with it, and it was easy. XTool's own Creative Studio software is also a big leap forward in my opinion. There are so many people that feel intimidated to get into lasers because of the barrier to entry maybe with software. Lightburn, for example, is a paid piece of software. XTool have released their software for free along with the machine, and it's so intuitive and easy to use. If you're a beginner even and you pick up one of these, I'm confident you could get it up and running in no time, just using all the guides that XTool have provided and all the steps they show in the software to get you started. They've genuinely nailed this machine, and I believe anybody could use it. Their safety first approach is also a key point here worth mentioning. This whole machine has been designed around safety. The machine will not let you near it when it's running. The second you open that lid, it cuts off and keeps you safe. Also, you saw that I started a fire there in the video. Detected that straight away, the machine shut off and warned me in the software. I like seeing that. It gives me trust in the machine. I'm here in a wooden workshop, you know, if something goes wrong, I'm confident it would be able to alert me, and that's what you want. And like I said, I don't see many people testing these things out here on YouTube, but I like to test those things, and I like to hold people responsible if things like that fail. But here, it delivered in every area. I was really pleased with it, and like I said, had I invested in this personally, I would not be disappointed. I also really loved the single button on the front of the machine. It was really simple. It has so many different functions, and there's a whole bunch of colors that are indicators for different things. But it was just simple. You use the software, you do what you need to do, and then the software will tell you, go to the machine and press the button to do X. And that is just really simple. You can't get it wrong. And it feels safe as well. It feels like you can't make a mistake. And I imagine if you're really new to lasers, that's a good thing. It's really user-friendly, easy to use. The riser base and the rotary kit were also an exceptional addition to the machine here. Like I said in the video, it opened up a wider range of material heights, and the rotary kit as well just blew me away. The amount of things they've thought about there. It has 4 different ways of holding materials. You can pretty much work with anything, and I love that. I love seeing that a company has truly thought about the process and nailed the design decisions to create such a good product. In terms of downsides, honestly, there weren't really any at all. From the moment I opened this up to the moment I did the last rotary engravings on it, it was just such a pleasant experience. The software guides you through everything, the user manuals and the user guides, extremely well written, they're easy to follow, it was easy to assemble. I had this thing running within 20 or 30 minutes, and that's installing the additional riser base as well. I don't really have anything negative to say about it. If I could be really picky, I'd say that the extraction tube they included wasn't really long enough to do anything meaningful with. I had to extend that in order to output the fumes outside of the workshop, but I can understand that in a way because they do also sell that extraction system, which is the correct way to do it. So there we have it, guys. I hope that was useful. If you enjoyed my video and you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Occasionally I do things like this. Like I say, I'm not a review channel, but I make things like this and I always give my honest feedback. So I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.